Welcome to our journey of transformation. We are in the fifth stage of our journey, studying the parables, the conversations, and the principles of Jesus that teach us how to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. For as we have seen throughout our journey, loving God with heart, soul, mind, and strength leads us to want to love as He loves. So for this reason, we're studying the teachings of Jesus to learn how to love our neighbors as God loves our neighbors, with the same unconditional love. At this time, we're going to study from Luke chapter 14 about a moment in which Jesus went to dine with a notable Pharisee and what happened in the conversation between Jesus and the Pharisee. So turn with me to Luke chapter 14, beginning with verse 1. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. Then he asked them, If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out? And they had nothing to say. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, Give this person your seat. Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, Friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all of the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then Jesus said to his host, When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Having dinner and a chat with good friends can be a very enjoyable experience. The conversation is easy, and there are no awkward expectations. We can leave tensions of the day at the door and relax with the feelings of being accepted and appreciated by our friends. Jesus must have felt this way when he spent time in the home of his friends, like the family of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. On the other hand, having dinner in the home of someone we do not know very well can be uncomfortable. We may not have any conversational interests in common. We are uncertain about the customs and traditions of the home, and we feel like embarrassment could come at any moment. Was this the way Jesus felt the time when he dined with Simon the Pharisee and the woman entered unexpectedly, crying? But imagine being invited to someone's home who we do not know, who we know does not like us, and whose motives for inviting us have nothing to do with our personal enjoyment or health. Most likely, we would find a good excuse to decline the offer. If we decided to be brave and attend the dinner, we would no doubt run away as soon as we entered through the door and saw everyone suspiciously staring at us. These were the circumstances when Jesus went to dine in the home of a powerful Pharisee, but he stayed nevertheless. Luke tells us that when he entered the home, he was being carefully watched. Do you feel the eyes on you and the body language of those present, like they are about to jump on you? Why did Jesus go there? The answer is that he had some lessons to teach the guests about humility, and he wanted to show his own disciples that they must not be afraid. Plus, there was someone there who needed to be healed. It was a Sabbath, Saturday. the day Jews were forbidden by the law of Moses to work. It was supposed to be a day of rest. The Sabbath also became part of the strategy of the Pharisees to accuse Jesus of error. These people and their predecessors had made a long list of traditions about what constituted work, and used these traditions to control and condemn their fellow Jews who failed to obey them. But these traditions were not from God or Moses, and Jesus and his followers did not submit to them. So the Pharisees used their invented rules as an excuse to criticize Jesus for violating the law. But it was their law, not God's law. One specific way of challenging Jesus was to claim that he healed on the Sabbath, and when he did so, he was doing work and therefore violating the law. And not so coincidentally, when he arrived at the dinner, there was a man sitting in front of him who was sick with some sort of disease, perhaps heart disease, that made his body swell from water retention. He did not belong at this dinner. He looked strangely out of place among the finely dressed Pharisees. He was a plant, placed there by someone in the group to see if Jesus would heal him. They were actually tempting Jesus to violate the Sabbath right there in this home by healing the sick man. Maybe they believed that Jesus would not ignore a chance to show compassion. But at the same time, none of them seemed to question that throwing a formal dinner party for a large group of people on the Sabbath might have been a form of work, at least for the servants in the home. The whole scene was comical. How could they think that Jesus would not detect their motives? One would not have to be a prophet to understand what they were trying to do. And what if he actually did heal the man? Would not the miracle prove that he was from God, and they would therefore have no right to accuse Jesus of being false? This was a plan made to backfire from the beginning. Jesus did not waste time wondering what to do. He immediately asked the Pharisees and the experts in the law, who were also suspiciously present, if it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath. He brought the issue straight to them. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? If this was the game they wanted to play, then let's get on with it. It was as if no one was going to address the fact that there was an elephant in the room, and then Jesus suddenly tells them, hey guys, there's an elephant in the room and we're going to take care of it right now. But they all remained silent. They began to realize at this point that this scene was not going to turn out the way they had planned. So Jesus took hold of the man who was sick, holding him close. Jesus was doing what the Samaritan did in the parable when he went over to the Jew who was lying half dead by the roadside and cured his wounds. Jesus brought him close, healed him, and then sent him on his way. The man who had been sick did not belong at this dinner, and Jesus mercifully let him go. The Pharisees had tried to take advantage of him, but he left healed and happy. Then, looking back at the astonished, annoyed, and nervous guests, he asked them a serious question. If one of their children or one of their animals were to fall into a well on the Sabbath, would they not immediately pull the child out or the animal out to safety? Of course. Then why? Why would it be wrong to heal someone with a life-threatening disease on the Sabbath? No answer. At this point, we would probably ask for our coat and leave. Mission accomplished. But it looks like Jesus is going to stay for dinner. He has a captive audience now. People were afraid to leave. Jesus had some lessons he would like to teach the group, especially because among these proud religious leaders, there was a considerable lack of humility. They invited him. Now they would have to listen to him. He begins by describing what he'd observed when everybody was arriving. Each guest immediately looked around the table to decide where to sit and rushed to sit in the best seats closest to the host to enjoy privilege and status. Jesus explained that this approach was dangerous. If a person chose a good seat and did not really deserve to sit that close to the host, someone could humiliate him by instructing him to move to a faraway seat. Jesus recommended that it's better for a guest to choose a seat far away from the host, and then someone might come to invite him to sit closer. But Jesus was not teaching them proper etiquette for a banquet. He was teaching them a principle of God's kingdom, using a specific example of that principle. The principle, too, is a promise. The one who lifts himself up will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be lifted up. This promise defines a fundamental truth about how the Father deals with us. We can receive confidence from it, knowing that if we humble ourselves, he will lift us up. Or we can be afraid of it, knowing that if we lift ourselves up, he's going to humble us. The teaching actually struck at the heart of the pride of these religious leaders. They loved privilege, respect, and honor from people. It was their drug. They habitually looked for ways to demand recognition, but they did not deserve this respect because their hearts were far from God. If they continued to lift themselves up, God would humble them, dramatically and even tragically. This was a promise. Jesus continued the lesson about humility with another illustration about organizing a banquet. Because of their thirst for honor from men, these Pharisees always invited people to banquets who would acknowledge them and bring them respect because of their presence. Maybe this was another reason for running the risk of inviting Jesus. Their view was that if you throw a dinner party, make sure to invite the most important people, because then you can brag about who came. Humility looks at life much differently. Humility means to lower yourself in order to serve the needs of others instead of your own needs. In this way, humility connects with unconditional love, loving those who cannot do anything for you in return, so that love is pure. As an example of the relationship between humility and love, Jesus counseled the host of the dinner to organize a luncheon or dinner, but not invite his friends, family members, or rich neighbors. These people could pay him back by inviting him to their homes. They were of the same class or higher and would be able to compensate him. Instead, and in harmony with what the Samaritan did for the injured Jew, he should invite people he does not know, people from the streets, people in desperate need of food and friendship. Such people could not pay him back, but he would also store up treasure in heaven for doing it. This is the way of serving in humility. It is the same humble love the Samaritan had for his neighbor, unconditional, without compensation. There was still another form of humility that these righteous leaders, religious leaders, self-righteous religious leaders were far from ready to learn. The humility to admit their mistakes, ask for forgiveness, and make the necessary changes in their hearts and behavior to bring them closer to the Father. Even after all Jesus had shown them that day, they were not ready to admit that there was anything they needed to change. In fact, some of these men may have been among the Pharisees who were instrumental in engineering the death of Jesus later. It is doubtful that they ever asked him back for dinner. Now think about the qualities of love that are manifested here through the words and behavior of Jesus. There's compassion. Compassion certainly is a quality of love. It is to feel the suffering of another person deeply enough to want to relieve their suffering. How did Jesus practice compassion? While the Pharisees tried to take advantage of the sick man, Jesus brought him close, understood his suffering, and healed him. There is mercy. Mercy is to relieve another person's suffering without thinking about whether they deserve relief. How did Jesus practice mercy? Jesus relieved the sick man's suffering, even though the guests at the banquet believed it was not lawful to heal on the Sabbath. Jesus' mercy triumphed over their prejudices. Kindness is another quality of love. It is to do something for someone that makes their life easier and more pleasant. And how did Jesus practice kindness here? By healing, of course. Healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is always an act of kindness, making life easier and more enjoyable. And of course, there's humility in the teaching of Jesus here. Obviously, it is to lower ourselves, for example, by admitting our mistakes, serving the needs of others first, and recognizing, like a child, one's smallness, weakness, and dependence on others, and need to learn. What did Jesus teach about the practice of humility here? He taught the guests to value the needs of the sick man over their own need to observe a law, to let others have the priority to go first, and to serve the needs of others who are different from us. And there's love that is unconditional. Unconditional love is to care for the welfare of another person without expecting anything in return or thinking about whether the person deserves our care. And what did Jesus teach about the practice of unconditional love here? He taught the host to invite people to his banquet who had desperate needs and who could not repay him in any form. There is generosity, another quality of love. It's to freely give without any thought of receiving something in return. And what did Jesus teach about generosity here? He taught the host that genuine generosity is kindness offered to people who cannot pay us back. And there is integrity. Integrity is another quality of love that we can show to our neighbors because it means to be the same person no matter whom we are with or where we are. It means to be transparent and sincere and honest. And what did Jesus teach about the practice of integrity? He compelled the Pharisees to be honest about their motives and sincere in their treatment of other people. Now, it's our turn to create practice and to go and do likewise, as Jesus told the expert in the law after telling him the story of the Samaritan. Go and do likewise. So some questions for us to think about. When will you allow others to go first, choose first, satisfy their preferences first, feel comfortable and rest first before you? What can you do to make a daily habit of showing kindness and generosity to someone who cannot pay you back? How can you become more aware of how quickly and freely you admit your mistakes without justifying yourself? What will you do differently if you decide to give priority to showing mercy to people over and above other values you thought were more important? Mercy comes first. What will you do to show mercy triumphs? And lastly, how will your life be different if instead of looking for help for yourself, you look for ways to help others? So in your journey, as you learn to practice humility, the humility of love, may God bless you.